I was poisoned with a bizarre toxin. It flared up every midnight, bringing agony worse than death. A mysterious voice had told me the only cure was a genuine tear from the most prominent socialite in New York City. To stay alive, I disguised myself as a waiter to get close to her. I even became her personal bodyguard, calculating every single day how to break her heart and make her cry. Tick, tock. The rusted hands of the clock on my wall pointed to 12. The very next second, I plunged into hell. It was an indescribable, vicious agony, like countless ants gnawing away at my heart. I curled into a ball as cold sweat instantly soaked my shirt. My jaw locked tight, filling my mouth with the metallic taste of blood, but my throat could not produce even a whimper for mercy. This was heartbane. A month ago, it had taken root inside my body without warning, acting like a deadly alarm clock from the underworld. It struck precisely at midnight, growing more violent each time. That same mysterious voice had informed me that within 3 months, heartbane would turn me into a dried husk. The sole antidote belonged to Anna Sinclair, the heiress to the wealthiest dynasty in Manhattan. I needed a single tear of true sorrow from her. I was a penniless nobody raised in a gritty Bronx orphanage, while Anna Sinclair was the golden girl standing high above the clouds. An entire galaxy separated us. But I refused to die, so I came for her. I spent my last $300 on a catering uniform and sneaked into Anna's 20th birthday party. The bash was held on the Artemis, a megayacht cruising down the Hudson River, radiating absolute luxury. The host was Carter Sterling, a notorious Manhattan playboy and Anna's most vocal pursuer. I navigated the crowd like a ghost with a serving tray, my eyes locked on her silhouette like a starving wolf. Anna sat quietly in a corner, draped in a stunning ivory evening gown. Beside her sat her best friend, Chloe Vance. Chloe scanned me with sheer disgust. She leaned into Carter and whispered about the yacht's terrible security. She called me a creep and accused me of being a street thief. Her voice was low but pierced my ears like needles. Carter followed her gaze and frowned. He waved his hand at me like he was swatting a fly. He told me to get lost and stop ruining the view for Anna. I lowered my head, hiding the cold intent in my eyes, and stepped back into the shadows. I did not care about the humiliation. My only target was Anna's tear. Halfway through the party, Carter dropped to one knee with a bouquet of blue roses, ready to deliver a passionate confession. Every eye on the deck turned toward them. The moment had arrived. I took a deep breath, lifted my tray, and deliberately stumbled into a wealthy guest. Champagne glasses shattered across the deck. Chaos erupted. I had already set my sights on a heavily intoxicated 200-pound man. With a subtle, calculated shove, I sent him stumbling forward like a runaway truck straight toward Anna. Carter panicked. He tried to play the hero but tripped over his own feet. I had planned this down to the millimeter. Just as the heavy man was about to crush Anna, I darted out like a shadow. I braced myself and used my back to absorb the massive weight. A loud thud echoed, and my bones felt like they were shattering. I clenched my jaw and used my free arm to firmly shield Anna's shoulders. I asked if she was okay. My voice was raspy from suppressing the pain. Anna was pale from the shock, but she quickly regained her composure. A flicker of surprise and complex emotion flashed in her clear eyes. She thanked me and said she was fine. Security hauled the drunk man away. Carter stormed over, absolutely furious. I had ruined his grand proposal and stolen his spotlight, and he looked ready to skin me alive. He pointed right at my nose and cursed at me, demanding to know if I did it on purpose. I kept my head down, playing the part of a terrified temp worker. Chloe rushed over, her words dripping with venom. She accused me of pulling a cheap stunt to get Anna's attention. She called me a gutter rat reaching for the stars. The surrounding guests began whispering, their eyes full of contempt. Just then, Anna frowned. She told them to stop. Her cool voice was not loud, but it instantly silenced the chatter. She stood up and told Carter that I was only trying to protect her, asking him to leave me alone. Carter's face turned red, then pale. He angrily waved his hand and ordered security to drag me away, shouting that he never wanted to see my face again. I was fired that very night. The following afternoon, a Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up outside my dilapidated Bronx apartment building. A middle-aged butler stepped out and addressed me with utmost respect. He said Miss Sinclair wished to see me. I got into the luxury car and was driven to the legendary Sinclair estate in the Hamptons. Anna was sitting on a garden swing, wearing a simple white sundress, looking like an ethereal spirit. She thanked me again for the previous night. I replied that it was nothing. Her gaze turned sharp as she admitted she had me investigated. She rattled off my details. Noah, 21 years old, orphaned, dropped out of college to pay off the gambling debts of my foster parents. She noted that I owed a lot of money. My heart tightened, but I kept my face perfectly neutral. I gave a self-deprecating laugh and asked if she brought me here to pay me off and tell me to stay away. Anna shook her head. She said she needed a driver and a bodyguard. The salary would be enough to clear my debts and give me a decent life. This was a literal lottery win, and it fell perfectly into my master plan. Just like that, I became the personal bodyguard for the most coveted heiress in New York. Word spread quickly to Carter and Chloe. They tracked us down immediately. Chloe screamed at Anna, asking if she was out of her mind for keeping a shady broke loser around. Carter was far more direct. He walked up to me, whipped out a checkbook, and slapped a piece of paper against my chest. He demanded to know my price and asked if $1 million was enough to make me vanish. He looked at me like I was a beggar. The check fluttered to the ground. I bent over with a blank expression, picked it up, glanced at the zeros, and slowly tore it into tiny confetti right in front of them. I told him my life was worth more than that. I stared at him with ice in my veins. Carter's face darkened with rage. He cursed at me and swung his fist toward my jaw. But I was no longer the punching bag I used to be. The agony of the heartbane had secretly fortified my physical body. I effortlessly caught his wrist. With a slight squeeze, Carter let out a shriek like a slaughtered pig. Anna's cool voice commanded me to stop. I let go and retreated behind her. Anna glared at them, her tone laced with a severe warning. She declared that I worked for her now, and she expected them to show some respect. Defeated and humiliated, the two of them stormed off. Before leaving, Chloe shot me a lethal glare and told me to watch my back. I moved into the Sinclair estate. I shadowed Anna 24 hours a day, driving her to classes at Columbia University and escorting her to high society galas. Carter and Chloe did not back down. They tried every dirty trick in the playbook to drive me away. They slashed the tires of my assigned SUV, slipped laxatives into the meals I prepped for Anna, and even hired street thugs to jump me when I went out. But their petty schemes were laughable against the superhuman senses the heartbane had given me. Once, Chloe lured me to an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn, where a dozen goons armed with steel pipes were waiting in the shadows. I walked right into the trap. Less than 5 minutes later, every single thug was groaning on the concrete floor, and I only had a speck of dust on my tailored suit. I walked slowly toward Chloe, who was paralyzed with fear. She stared at me like I was a demon, begging me to stay away and asking what kind of freak I was. I leaned down and whispered in her ear. I told her to relay a message to Carter. Next time, he needed to hire professionals who actually carried guns. They backed off significantly after that. Meanwhile, my relationship with Anna began to shift as we spent every waking moment together. I realized she was nothing like the icy socialite the tabloids painted her to be. She would sneak food to stray cats in the rain. She would cry silently while watching classic movies. Whenever the midnight heartbane tortured me into a pale, sweating mess, she would quietly hand me a glass of warm water. She would look at me with those pristine eyes and softly ask if I was sick and needed a doctor. She was incredibly kind and profoundly lonely. I was the only person who dared to speak to her like a normal human being. Slowly, my frozen, hardened heart began to crack. But I could not afford to fall for her. My objective was her tear. I needed it to survive. I could not develop feelings for my prey. I decided to pull the trigger on my plan. I needed one single tear to buy my life back. I sought Carter out directly. I told him I wanted $5 million in cash. Carter paused for a second before flashing a mockingly arrogant grin. He laughed, and said my noble act was finally dropping. He had his men bring over a titanium briefcase stuffed with $100 bills. He told me to take the money and disappear from Anna's life forever. I nodded and took the case. Carrying the briefcase, I purposely walked down the secluded garden path Anna always took for her afternoon stroll. Just as I expected, we crossed paths at the end of the trail. She saw me. She saw the heavy briefcase. She also saw a highly smug Carter standing a short distance away. Her footsteps faltered. The color drained from her face completely. She walked up to me, her voice trembling slightly, and asked what was going on. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to bury every ounce of my true emotions. With a sharp click, I popped the briefcase open, revealing stacks of crisp red bills. I looked up, wearing the coldest, greediest expression I could muster. I told her it was exactly what it looked like. I said I only got close to her for the payout, mocking her for being naive enough to think I actually cared. Anna swayed on her feet. She stared at me in pure disbelief as a layer of mist quickly formed in her bright eyes. Her voice cracked with desperation as she pleaded with me to say it was a lie. I hardened my heart and delivered the final blow. I told her it was the truth. I said Carter had deeper pockets and was much more generous, adding that pretending to care about her was just too exhausting. Finally, a single tear slipped from the corner of her eye. It fell like shattered crystal, hitting the paved stone and simultaneously striking my very soul. In that exact fraction of a second, I felt the heartbane coiled inside my chest miraculously retreat. The bone-deep agony dissolved. Her tear was truly the antidote. A massive wave of physical relief flooded my system, yet I felt zero joy. Instead, a phantom pain 10 million times worse than the poison ripped through my chest. Looking at her eyes, overflowing with disappointment and sorrow, I realized for the first time that hurting her was worse than burning in hell. Anna took a sharp, ragged breath, forcefully holding back the rest of her tears. She raised her hand and slapped me across the face with all her might. She told me to get out and never show my face again. She turned around and walked away without looking back. I stood frozen. My cheek burned with a fierce sting, but my chest felt completely hollowed out. I had won. I had obtained the cure. But why did I feel like I had just lost my entire universe? I left the Sinclair estate with the $5 million and returned to my damp, moldy Bronx apartment. I never touched a single cent of that cash. I kicked the briefcase under my bed like it was a bag of toxic waste. Midnight came and went. The heartbane still flared, but its intensity was drastically reduced. Anna's single tear acted like a potent anesthetic. However, the physical relief came at the cost of boundless psychological torture. My mind was plagued by the final look she gave me. I suffered from chronic insomnia. I could barely eat. I realized I had truly fallen in love with her. A week later, that familiar Rolls-Royce parked right in front of me on the street. Chloe practically kicked the door open, her face twisted with absolute fury. She called me a bastard and a con artist, screaming at me to confess what I had done to Anna. I ignored her completely. She yelled that since I left, Anna had locked herself in her room, refusing to eat or drink. She had spiked a dangerous fever and was rushed to the hospital the previous night. My heart lurched violently. Chloe threw a sleek black debit card on my chest. She said there was $5 million on it and ordered me to take the money and get out of New York. I looked at the card on the pavement and slowly stood up. My voice was incredibly hoarse as I demanded she take me to her. Chloe told me to keep dreaming. I did not waste another breath. I shoved past her, got into the passenger seat, and commanded the driver to head to the hospital. The driver shivered and instinctively started the engine. Chloe stomped her foot in rage, but had no choice but to get in the back. In the penthouse VIP suite of NYU Langone, I finally saw Anna. She lay quietly on the hospital bed. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and she looked incredibly frail. It felt like a giant, invisible hand was squeezing my lungs. I walked to the edge of the bed and gently took her freezing hand. She seemed to sense my presence and slowly opened her eyes. The shock in her gaze quickly hardened into glacial ice. She asked in a weak but biting tone if I came to laugh at her misery. She tried to pull her hand away, but I held on tightly. Chloe screeched from the corner, calling me a liar and ordering me out. I tuned her out entirely. I locked eyes with Anna and confessed everything. I told her my betrayal was a lie. I never took Carter's money, and I never approached her for cash. Anna flinched slightly. She asked why I did it then. I opened my mouth, but the absurd truth died on my tongue. How could I say I needed her tear as a magical cure? Would she ever believe that? Before I could speak, the heavy hospital door crashed open. Carter stormed in with a squad of heavy-set bodyguards, wearing a wicked sneer. He saw me holding her hand, and his eyes instantly went bloodshot. He barked at his men to cripple me and throw me out the window. The bodyguards rushed forward. I stood up, forming a human barricade in front of her bed. I declared that whoever touched her would have to step over my dead body. My gaze turned murderous. The dormant heartbane inside my veins began to boil. My pure, unfiltered aura of violence paralyzed the bodyguards. They hesitated. Carter cursed them for being useless cowards. To everyone's shock, he pulled a sleek black handgun from his jacket and aimed the dark muzzle straight at my chest. Anna and Chloe screamed in terror, begging him to put the gun down. Carter sneered, declaring he was going to end my miserable life right then and there. Carter had completely lost his mind. I stared at him coldly, completely devoid of fear. But right at that moment, disaster struck from within. The heartbane mutated, initiating a catastrophic backlash. A spike of agony 100 times worse than the midnight attacks seized my heart. I let out a choked grunt and collapsed onto one knee. Cold sweat poured down my face. My vision blurred, and my sanity began to slip away into a sea of madness. Anna screamed my name and struggled to get out of bed. Carter threw his head back and laughed maniacally. He taunted me, calling it sweet karma. He slowly walked toward me, keeping the gun steady. He asked if I even knew what was inside my body. He revealed that heartbane was a masterpiece created by the syndicate. He promised it would make me die, screaming in endless torment. The syndicate. I fought through the blinding pain, looking up at him with bloodshot eyes, and asked who he really was. Carter smirked maliciously, stating his identity did not matter. What mattered was that from the very beginning, I, Subject 10, was nothing but a disposable tool. He explained I was planted to inflict maximum emotional trauma on Anna to force her latent empathic abilities to awaken. And now, the tool needed to be disposed of. With his free hand, he pulled a tactical combat knife from his belt and lunged forward, aiming straight for my heart. I was paralyzed by the poison. I could only watch the gleaming blade magnify in my pupils. In that split second, a blur of white threw itself in front of me. It was Anna. She spread her arms wide, using her fragile body as a human shield. The sickening sound of metal tearing through flesh echoed in the room. Crimson blood instantly blossomed across her pristine white hospital gown. Time froze. Chloe let out a blood-curdling shriek. Carter froze in absolute horror, dropping the knife and stammering that she'd jumped in the way on purpose. My mind went completely blank. A tsunami of apocalyptic rage and heart-shredding grief obliterated everything else. I unleashed a roar that did not sound remotely human. The heartbane exploded inside me. Dozens of thick, shadowy tendrils erupted violently from my flesh. They instantly lashed out, grabbing Carter and his bodyguards. The men screamed in sheer terror, suspended in midair as the dark vines violently drained their life force. They cried out, calling me a monster. I slowly stood up, engulfed in a terrifying aura of pitch-black energy. I walked toward Carter, who had collapsed onto the floor in a puddle of his own fear. My eyes had turned solid black. I was going to kill him. I was going to tear him into microscopic pieces. A fragile whisper pierced through my fading sanity. Anna weakly called my name and begged me to stop. I snapped my head around. She was lying in a pool of blood, barely holding on. Yet, her pale face showed absolutely no fear of the monster I had become. Her eyes held a love and sorrow so profound it defied logic. She managed a weak smile, calling me a fool. A single, crystalline tear rolled down her cheek. She whispered that she already knew. Her tear fell onto the back of my hand. Instantly, a surge of pure, radiant warmth flooded my veins. The violent, chaotic frenzy of the heartbane immediately surrendered to this soothing energy. The horrific black aura wrapping my body faded away. Anna used the last ounce of her strength to hold my hand. In that fleeting moment, a supernatural tether connected our minds. I saw straight into her soul. She revealed that from the very first day, she sensed a deep, agonizing pain clinging to my spirit. Even separated by walls, her empathic gift allowed her to feel the agonizing torment I suffered every midnight. She hired me just to keep me close, hoping she could find a way to heal me. She confessed that on the day I faked my betrayal, she was indeed heartbroken. But she did not cry because I lied to her. She cried because, in a moment I delivered those cruel words, she felt my internal suffering. My heart was breaking 1,000 times worse than hers. She told me her tears were never spilled because I hurt her, but because her soul was bleeding from my pain. This was her rare empathic mutation. She absorbed the extreme emotions of others, and she used her tears as a unique mechanism to heal my broken soul. The brutal truth hit me like a freight train. Watching the color fade from her face, I felt a suffocating tightness in my chest. I was a complete and utter bastard. I had deliberately tortured the only person in this world who genuinely cared about my survival. I dropped to my knees, holding her cooling body, apologizing repeatedly through uncontrollable sobs. The dam broke. For the first time in my entire life, I wept. Coughing up blood, Carter confessed the rest of the sinister plot. The Sinclair family bloodline carried a rare, genetic mutation that required extreme emotional trauma to fully awaken. The syndicate orchestrated the entire charade to steal her ability. They used me and my horrific suffering as a catalyst. Carter laughed hysterically, declaring that their grand experiment had failed, but ensuring none of us would leave the room alive. The moment the words left his mouth, every glass window in the suite shattered inward. Over a dozen figures clad in tactical gear and pale ghost masks vaulted into the room like phantoms. They were the syndicate's elite cleaners. The squad leader glanced at the dying Carter, scoffed, and called him a pathetic failure. His gaze shifted to me and Anna. He declared that a rogue weapon and an incomplete test subject were the perfect targets for a joint disposal. I gently placed Anna behind me. I stood tall, my eyes burning with absolute murderous intent. I told them that if they wanted her, they had to go through me. The leader coldly accepted the challenge. He signaled his men, and the masked assassins swarmed me. Thanks to Anna's tear, the heartbane had permanently fused with my biology, transforming into a wellspring of colossal power. I possessed world-shattering strength. I charged headfirst into the fray. The syndicate killers were ruthlessly efficient, aiming only for lethal strikes. But I was operating on an entirely different level. Dark bioenergy tendrils spiraled around my arms, hardening into indestructible gauntlets and blades. One assassin tried to ambush me from the blind spot. I delivered a brutal spinning kick that sent him crashing into the drywall, shattering his ribcage. Another thrust a combat knife at my throat. I parried with a shadowy vine and shattered his mask and jaw with a devastating backhand. In less than 10 minutes, the floor was littered with groaning, crippled assassins. Only the leader remained standing. Pure terror finally cracked his stoic composure. He admitted he underestimated me, realizing I was no longer a tool, but a brand new apex predator. I pointed at the shattered window and ordered him to run, offering to pretend this never happened. My only priority was getting Anna to a surgical team. The leader flashed a twisted smile. He told me it was too late. He pulled a remote detonator from his vest and crushed the trigger. A high-pitched electronic beep echoed through the room. My supernatural senses pinpointed the threat immediately. The source was directly under Anna's bed. I whipped around and saw a brick of C4 strapped to the frame, the digital timer flashing a blazing red 5. The leader laughed maniacally and dove out the window. My mind went blank, yielding entirely to raw instinct. I threw myself over Anna, wrapping her tightly in my arms and shielding her with my back. Thousands of dark vines violently erupted from my pores, weaving over each other rapidly to form a massive, impenetrable cocoon around us. Boom! An ear-splitting explosion obliterated the VIP ward. The shockwave reduced the room to a blackened crater of rubble. The protective layer of dark vines cracked and disintegrated into ash. I coughed up a massive mouthful of blood. My internal organs felt like they had been thrown into a blender, and my back was completely shredded. But the girl safely tucked against my chest did not have a single scratch. Anna looked up at my horrific injuries, her eyes welling up with fresh tears. She frantically asked if I was okay. I forced a terribly awkward smile and told her it would take a lot more than that to kill me. In the smoldering ruins, the squad leader dragged his broken body from the debris, trying to limp away into the night. My eyes narrowed. A singular, razor-sharp black vine shot from the rubble, coiled tightly around his ankle, and violently yanked him back into the center of the room. At that moment, the chaotic sound of heavy boots flooded the corridor. Mr. Sinclair's private security detail and NYPD tactical units swarmed the area. The head butler took one look at the destroyed room and the blood-soaked Anna, his face turning ghostly pale. He ordered the guards to apprehend every surviving assassin. The syndicate's local cell was entirely dismantled. Medical personnel rushed in and wheeled Anna into the emergency trauma bay. I stood guard outside the operating doors like a soulless statue. Hours later, the surgical lights turned green. The lead surgeon stepped out and announced she was officially out of the woods. The agonizing tension keeping me upright finally snapped. The world went completely black, and I lost consciousness. When I finally opened my eyes, I was staring at the vaulted ceiling of a luxurious bedroom. Anna was sitting right by my side. She wore a simple, elegant dress. Her complexion was still a bit pale, but the light had returned to her eyes. Seeing me awake, she offered a smile that felt like the sun breaking through a storm. She softly said I was finally awake. I asked how long I was out. She told me it had been 3 days and nights. I tried to sit up, but she gently pressed me back down, warning me that the doctors said my injuries were severe. I immediately asked about her wound. She reassured me it was just a superficial cut and was healing perfectly. She also shared that the syndicate operatives were all in federal custody. Her expression dimmed slightly as she mentioned Carter had confessed to everything. Even Chloe was exposed as a planted informant meant to monitor her. I struggled to find the right words to comfort her, but she simply shook her head. She looked at me with immense sincerity. She whispered that she was actually grateful for their twisted plot. If they had not sent me to ruin her, we never would have found each other. Her eyes were as deep and gentle as a serene lake, and I found myself completely drawn in. I finally gathered the courage to reach out and hold her hand. I told her that in the beginning, I wanted her tears just to survive. But things had changed. I confessed that my love for her had nothing to do with saving my own life or fulfilling a mission. I told her that plain, ordinary Noah had simply fallen head over heels for Anna. Her eyes turned red with emotion. She squeezed my hand tightly, nodding vigorously. She whispered my name and told me she loved me too. The afternoon sunlight poured through the window, washing over our intertwined hands with a bright, comforting warmth. The crisis passed, and life reset itself. The syndicate's sinister operations in the city were completely eradicated. After surviving the crucible of death, the bond between Anna and me became utterly unbreakable. On the day we were discharged, Mr. Sinclair personally arrived to pick us up. He was an incredibly commanding presence. He looked at me with a complicated expression, acknowledging that I had saved his daughter's life. He told me the Sinclair family owed me a massive debt. He offered me anything I desired, millions in cash, real estate, or corporate equity. I shook my head. I turned to look at Anna, holding her hand firmly. I looked the patriarch in the eye and told him I did not want a single dime. I only wanted her. Mr. Sinclair remained silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. He conceded that if this was what Anna truly wanted, a father had no right to stand in the way. He gave us his unspoken blessing. We returned to the Sinclair estate and officially started our life together. I vowed to use my newfound abilities to eliminate any threat that dared approach her. In return, she used her boundless empathy and warmth to heal the lifelong scars on my soul. Our days were quiet, yet profoundly fulfilling. One evening, we lay in bed together, and she curled up against my chest like a kitten. She softly traced the skin over my heart and asked if the heartbane still caused me any pain. I smiled, caught her hand, and held it firmly against my chest. I told her the poison was completely docile now. I looked deeply into her eyes, which sparkled brighter than the Manhattan skyline. I spoke with absolute certainty, telling her my heart could no longer feel the pain because she had filled every empty space inside it. Anna's cheeks flushed crimson. She buried her face into my chest, her muffled voice teasingly calling me a smooth talker. I held her close, feeling an unprecedented sense of absolute peace. I used to believe that merely surviving was the only purpose in my life. Now I finally understood that truly living meant nothing without her by my side.